He then showed me the river of life, rising from the throne of God and of the Lamb, and flowing crystal clear down the middle of the city street. On either bank of the river was the tree of life, which in each year yields 12 crops of fruit, one in each month, and the leaves of which are for the healing of all nations. A scorching day in northern Spain. A man with a long walk ahead. He could be an office worker, a farmer, or perhaps a student. But those walking this road today are pilgrims, following in the way of the saint who is the patron of all Spain. This is El Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James the Apostle. For over 1,000 years, pilgrims have made this journey. Their destination, the shrine of the saint at Santiago de Compostela. James and his brother John were two of the earliest disciples called by Jesus. They were the sons of a Galilean fisherman, Zebedee, and his wife, Salome. Jesus had smilingly called them sons of thunder when describing their impulsive temperament. They were particularly close to Christ, and they witnessed the transfiguration and his lonely agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. After the resurrection, the apostles and disciples were commanded to go out and preach the gospel to the very ends of the earth. Tradition claims that they went their different ways to India, Africa, and Asia. James made his way to the parched land of Iberia, a country that ancient mapmakers compared to a bull's hide stretched out in the sun, the westerly outpost of the Roman Empire. His story is told by José María Ballesteros, who looks after today's pilgrims as the director of the Galician Office of Tourism in Compostela.
Bueno, Santiago vino a España indudablemente después de la muerte de Cristo, allá por el año 33-34. No sabemos ciertamente la fecha, no es fácil fijarla, pero en todo caso en la primera mitad del siglo I. Podemos conjeturar por la documentación que hay, pequeña, que entró en España por el Mediterráneo, tal vez cruzó la Bética, la Andalucía, y luego pasó por la Itálica. Esto supone atravesar las provincias de hoy de Extremadura, Mérida, pasaría por Coimbra, por Braga, y llega a tierras gallegas, situándose de preferencia en la zona de Iria Flavia, donde creó un centro de cristiandad.
James came to a rugged terrain, enclosed by mountains, with rivers flowing down to the rocky coast. Galicia, an ancient Celtic kingdom. Its people lived close to nature. They were farmers and shepherds, fishermen and sailors. They were also skilled at working stone, iron and wood. They were artists and musicians. The barns where they once stored food and meager produce are evidence of their agriculture, and their dwellings still overlook the sea, which was life and death for them. James the fisherman from Galilee brought the faith to a land called Finisterre, the very edge of the known world. Though it was 3,000 miles from home, the world to which James had come was also a part of Rome. Spain, Hispania, was the last outpost of the empire, but it had not always been so. The Spanish peninsula hangs, poised between two great continents, Africa and Europe. The first settlers to make their home here were tribesmen from North Africa, who crossed the Straits of Gibraltar some 3,000 years before Christ. They called their new home Iberia, land of rivers. 2,000 years later, the Celts migrated across the Pyrenees and settled in the north and west. Other settlers, Greeks and Phoenicians, pushed in from the Mediterranean and the Levant, bringing with them trade and commerce. Iberia became part of the conflict between the power of Carthage in North Africa and Rome, the new ascendant power of Europe. But even after Hannibal and Carthage had long since been vanquished, it took the Romans 200 years to establish their rule here. Fighting guerrilla campaigns in the mountains, the stubborn Iberians clung on to their homeland, but were finally defeated and brought into the empire. The Romans made their mark on Iberia, building bridges, roads, and aqueducts, and defending themselves with fortresses and walls. Their base in the northwest of Spain was a strategically positioned town commanding routes north into Gaul and south to the interior. The Emperor, Augustus Caesar, turned it into a military colony to defend the Roman peace. It was named after him, Zaragoza. According to tradition, at the end of his missionary journey from Galicia, the Apostle James came to this center. Francisco Sanchez Ventura is an author and an historian of Spain's early Christian history in Zaragoza. He takes up the story.
Como los aragoneses llevamos fama de ser un poco brutos, pues quizá por eso no consiguió, como consiguió en Granada, que le siguiera la gente y formar el grupo que él quería de los 12 apóstoles. Formó un grupo de 7 que están en la iglesia, el altar, que se llama de los convertidos, los 7 convertidos.
Zaragoza is marked out as a place of a revelation, which would link the Apostle James with the land of Iberia forever. This link is revealed by the Spanish Franciscan nun and mystic of the 17th century, Venerable Maria de Jesus of Agreda. In a vision she saw James, weary after several years of hard traveling, camped with his followers on the banks of the river Ebro outside the city. It was the night of January the 2nd, AD 40. Discouraged by his lack of success, he had separated from his companions to pray. From a distance he heard the sound of singing. Those with him also heard it, a sound which made them all weep for joy. A procession of angels approached them from afar. Maria wrote of that night, "They saw in the sky the most brilliant lights, brighter than the sun. The holy angels placed a throne within sight of the apostle, who was still wrapped in most exalted prayer, and heard much more plainly the celestial music, and saw more of the light than his disciples. The angels bore with them a small column hewn of marble or jasper, and a not very large image of their queen, made of some other material. seated on her throne on the clouds, and surrounded by the angelic choirs, the Queen of Heaven manifested herself to St. James. He was shown at the same time the image and the pillar carried by some of the angels. The Queen of Heaven addressed him, "My son James, this place the Most High and Omnipotent God of Heaven has destined to be consecrated by you upon earth for the erection of a temple and house of prayer." She went on to promise that the shrine would last until the end of time, and that she would reward the prayers of those who asked sincerely. According to the visionary Maria, the Blessed Virgin Mary, when she appeared to James by the river Ebro, was bilocated from Jerusalem, where she was living at the time. She then told him of his own fate. He would be the first of the apostles to be martyred, and the Lord wanted him to die in Jerusalem, where he himself had been crucified.
Entonces, a través de la mística María de Jesús de Ágreda, se conoce con todo detalle de cómo consistió la venida de la Virgen en carne mortal a Zaragoza. Cómo se encontró con Santiago, que estaba a orillas del Ebro, cómo le consoló, cómo le dio el encargo de que tenía que volver a Jerusalén y el templo. Y al mismo tiempo la promesa de que sería atendido en todas las peticiones.
James asked for special protection for the land he had tried to evangelize. The angels brought the column and the image to stand in the shrine, and one of them stayed behind to guard them. So the apostle built the first Christian church in the world by the banks of the river Ebro. At its heart was the pillar of jasper, reminding believers of the rock on which Christ promised to build his church. It was a rock that many would cling to in the dark days of persecution, when thousands died witnessing to the faith. Here also was an echo of a biblical forefather of James, the patriarch Jacob, who had taken a rock for a pillow and slept on it. He named the place Bethel, the house of God, and there he built the first Jewish temple. Maria Jesus calls El Pilar the workshop of the compassion of Mary and the never-ending fountain of wonders.
Pues bien, el Pilar, y esto lo saben muy pocos, estuvo en contacto con la pasión de Cristo. Todo lo que estuvo en contacto con Cristo durante su pasión ha aparecido. La cruz, los clavos, la columna donde la azotaron, absolutamente todo. Hombre, es de suponer que si en carne mortal, si partimos de la fe, de creer en que la Virgen vino en carne mortal a Zaragoza, no va a venir a traer una piedra que se encuentra por el camino. Tenía que tener un significado.
James returned to Palestine, to Jerusalem. The Acts of the Apostles describes the persecution. Herod Agrippa began to lay violent hands on the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. James was beheaded in AD 41 on March the 25th, the feast of the Annunciation, the first of the apostles to be martyred. Legend tells how his disciples secured the body and head and secretly took them to the port of Jaffa. There, a mysterious ship met them on the quay, the remains were taken on board, and the ship sailed away. Sometime later, it reached the Galician coast and traveled up the river Ulla, eventually reaching the settlement of Padron. Here there is a small sanctuary where James is said to have preached the gospel. The stone pillar beneath the altar is believed to be the one to which the boat was moored when the apostles' remains arrived at their final destination from Palestine. This region was ruled by a pagan queen, Lupa. At first, she refused to let the cargo come ashore for burial. but later lent her own oxen to take the body to rest in an old Roman burial ground a few miles inland. While James's body lay undisturbed in the deserted forest, Christian martyrs were dying in their thousands all over Iberia, persecuted by the Romans. The tomb was neglected, the legend forgotten. In the 4th century, Christianity became the religion of the whole Roman Empire, but not in time to prevent the decline of the old regime. By the 5th century, Pax Romanus in southern Europe was falling apart. The Visigoths, a warlike Germanic race, crossed the Alps and sacked Rome. They later also invaded Spain from Gaul and set themselves up as rulers. Their custom was to elect their king from an assembly of free-born equals. They were Arians, heretics, but eventually converted to Catholicism. They curbed the power of the Jews, who were forbidden to trade with Christians. This policy cost them dear, for the Jews sought protection from the Berbers of North Africa and their Arab leaders, followers of the Prophet Muhammad and a new creed, Islam. From the start, theirs was a faith on the move. It swept through Arabia and North Africa, unifying disparate tribes under a simple, basic belief: God is one. Iberia became a target of its expansionist ambitions. The opportunity came when a quarrel over the succession to the Visigoth monarchy led to civil war. The king's son hoped to become ruler without an election. Foiled in his plans, he appealed for help to Tariq, the governor of Tangier. The Moors landed in 711, defeated the prince's opponents, but instead of going home with the help of the Jews, they overran the south and within a short time conquered the whole peninsula. Many converted to Islam, and those who didn't fled to the north to Asturias. Here, a small guerrilla force in the mountains skirmished and raided like the Iberians, who 700 years earlier had fought the Romans. They were led by a Visigoth chieftain, Don Pelayo, who was to become a hero of Spanish history. Legend relates that he saw a cross in the sky, haloed with light, with an inscription which said, "With this sign the enemy will be defeated." The tide of conflict certainly turned at the Battle of Covadonga, and victory here gave birth to a new nation. Thanks to Pelayo, Christian Spain became a possibility. It would not suffer the same fate as Syria and Egypt, countries both rich in Christianity, but conquered by Islam. Covadonga, though, was only a small beginning, and defeat there did not stop the Moors. A mighty army crossed the Pyrenees into France. From here they hoped to spread the new religion throughout Western Europe. But by crossing the mountains they outstretched themselves. Cut off from reinforcements, they were defeated in 732 by Charles Martel at the Battle of Poitiers. They retreated back into the center and south of Spain, abandoning Galicia and the Christian mountain kingdoms. Islamic Spain centered on Cordoba and later Granada. Here they set up their own caliphate, independent of the rest of the Muslim world, and built a showplace for Islamic faith and life and learning in Al-Andalus. Astronomy, medicine, optics, mathematics, all flourished. The cool, spacious architecture, built around water, reminded believers that their faith had come from the desert, and that the ineffable mystery and unity of God could not be imaged by human art. Christians, meanwhile, set out to create a strong kingdom in the north. The memory of Covadonga was a sign for them that God had not abandoned his people, nor had his apostle James. for he was to return to play a vital part in the history of the emerging nation. In 812, a hermit, Pelagro, in the far west of Galicia, reported seeing in the night sky an array of unusually bright stars which hovered over a wooded field. The bishop of Iria Flavia, Theodomir, who knew something of the story of St. James's mission to this part of the country, came and saw for himself, and at once instructed men to excavate at the spot. There, on Sunday, July the 25th, they found a sarcophagus covered by a stone slab, in which lay the remains of James and two of his disciples. This place became known as Compostela, the Field of Stars. The bishop sent word of the discovery to the court.
El reino asturiano estaba allí recogido en Oviedo, es el Alfonso II el Casto. Le informa que acaba de encontrar las reliquias de Santiago. Alfonso II parece que informa a su vez a Carlomagno, se informa también a Roma. Alfonso II. Hay que pensar en el poder de convicción que tuvo que tener este Teodomiro para hacer venir desde Oviedo, con toda la impedimenta, con todo lo que supone en aquella época venir desde allá, 350 kilómetros hasta aquí, para reconocer una tumba desconocida en un pueblo prácticamente inexistente que era este lugar de Santiago, y reconocer in situ que en ese mausoleo y que ese cuerpo era el de Santiago.
The news of the saint's miraculous preservation began to draw the great and powerful of Europe to Compostela. Supposedly, Charlemagne before them had already been guided to the tomb, led there by a star like the three kings who came to see the Prince of Peace. His odyssey was chronicled by an ancient bard. As Charles looked up to the sky, he perceived a starry path, which had its beginning over the waters of Friesland, and passing by Germany and France and Aquitaine, and on through the middle of Gascony and Navarre, and straight through Spain, came at last to that place in Galicia, where lay hidden the body of the Apostle James. A richer and more magnificent church was built. The shrine of Compostela began to bring wealth, alms, and moral and spiritual support to the hard-pressed Christians of northern Spain. It became a symbol of unity and faith in their struggles against the Muslims, and gave them the confidence and inspiration in the fight back on the long road of reconquest. They had been forced to pay an annual tribute of 100 virgins to the Caliph of Cordoba. A new king, Ramiro, challenged the demand and refused to hand them over. Christian and Muslim armies gathered on the plain below the castle of Clavico, near where the pilgrim road reaches out to Castile. All day the battle raged, thousands falling on each side. By afternoon, the Christian cause seemed lost. Then came James, straight from heaven, leading an army of angels, crying, "Santiago y Tierra España," Santiago and a united Spain. Thousands of Moors were routed as his white horse cut through their ranks. Spain now had a leader whose title no earthly kingdom could dispute. From then on, he was called Matamoros, slayer of the Moors. He had shown himself and was the protector of his people. There were always dangers. Compostela, which had become a prosperous shrine, attracted looters and vandals. In the 10th century, the Northmen pillaged Galicia, sacking the town and robbing the shrine of its treasure. At the turn of the century, the legendary Caliph Al-Mansur rode triumphantly into the basilica, only to find everyone had fled, except for a monk, who was the custodian of the saint's tomb. "What are you doing here? Are you not afraid?" "I am the familiar of St. James, and I am at my prayers," the monk replied. Al-Mansur spared the shrine. The relics had already been removed, but the church and the city he burnt to the ground. He forced his Christian prisoners to carry the great bells on their shoulders all the way to Cordoba, where, inverted and filled with oil, they served as lamps in the great mosque. But nothing now could stop the power of the shrine to draw visitors. Pilgrimages, which had already begun before the devastation, were raised to official status through the prestigious patronage of the Benedictine monastery at Cluny in Burgundy, and by the efforts of Guy, its abbot. He was one of the first to encourage large numbers to take the cockle shell, the badge and symbol of pilgrims, and set out on the road. For a millennium, this has been the pilgrim's way from all over Europe. The road is a living thing, like a human vein, full of human traffic, bearing its sins and needs, the great and the small, the sick and the sinful, the powerful and the holy. In the Middle Ages, there was, of course, but one universal Christian church. An existence outside the membership of this religion was unthinkable. The spiritual hold that pilgrimage had on people of every rank was immense. In those days, there were three great Christian shrines: Rome, Jerusalem, and Compostela, from where the light of the star of Santiago lit up the whole of Western Europe and beyond. Only those who made the hazardous journey here could truly call themselves pilgrims, while the journey to Rome and Jerusalem centered on the shrine. The Camino de Santiago was as much concerned with the road itself. It stretches out for 900 miles, an image of a journey of faith with all the endurance and adventure needed for Christian discipleship. A road to be traveled in blistering heat, which would take 4 to 5 months of a lifetime. Many were gone for several years. Many more died on the way, never to return at all. In the high Middle Ages, there would have been 100,000 people on the road at any one time. The pilgrimage could be a penance, a plea for help, an act of thanksgiving, a holiday. Piety mixed with sightseeing, danger with good companionship. The road is harsh, but it also provides places of hospitality, welcome, peace, and shade from the sun. From the 11th century, inns and hostels began to be built along the way. Some had up to 50 beds and could offer the pilgrims bread, wine, meat and vegetables. Bridges were built across rivers, and monasteries on the route acquired their own relics and stories of miracles to encourage the pilgrims.
La primera peregrinación de la cual tenemos documentos y que está fijada es la del obispo de la Basílica francesa de Le Puy, Gotescalco, que viene hacia el año 950. Después de él ha sido una riada grande de gentes de todas las condiciones sociales, nobles, reyes, príncipes, vasallos, gente simple del país. Mucha gente de iglesia que hoy veneramos en los altares. Ahí tenemos a San Francisco de Asís, uno de los grandes peregrinos a Compostela, Santo Domingo Guzmán, Santa Matilde, reina de Inglaterra, juntamente con James Stewart y Eduardo II.
One of the world's first guidebooks was written by a monk of Poitou in 1140. He recounts the life and legends of St. James and describes the road just as he saw it, step by step, mile by mile. The detail of his description remains vivid even today. It is all still here. The mountains, fields of wheat, the heat and dust. He described this village, Estella, as a place of good bread, wine, meat and fish. The water of the river is sweet, clean and good. The roads that became the Camino de Santiago actually began in towns and cities in France, where pilgrims gathered to make the journey. Those from the north, from England, the Netherlands and Scandinavia, started from Paris, walking through Orléans, Tours and Bordeaux. Others came from the shrine of Vézelay in Burgundy and from the Basilica of Le Puy in eastern France. The roads merge where the mountains range around Roncesvalles in the Pyrenees. A fourth route from Arles and Toulouse in the south crossed at the pass of Somport before descending gently into Spain. Among the sun-kissed flowers and golden grain fields, a Romanesque chapel proudly points out the way through the ancient kingdom of Navarre. Here the road approaches Puente la Reina, where, like rivers of light, all pilgrim roads meet to become one. Queen Urraca, the wife of Alfonso VI of Navarre, built this famous bridge to help the vast number of pilgrims from north of the Pyrenees to cross the river Arga. There is a legend of a mysterious bird which appeared each year on the eve of the feast of the Assumption of Mary. The bird, covered in feathers of a miraculous hue, dipped its wings in the river and washed the face of the image of the Virgin with the waters that had come down from the snows of the Pyrenees, and then flew away to who knows where. The story reminds the pilgrim that the journey begins with repentance, a cleansing of the heart and will. There is no shortcut to holiness. The road goes on, a picture of our need to persevere. Its history is not only of saints and miracles, but also of human pride and folly. One of those who's buried on the pilgrim road is a villain of history, Cesare Borgia. When he had lost his power in Italy, he was imprisoned in Castile, but managed to escape to Navarre, where he became a soldier of fortune. The king sent him to Vienna to put down a rebellion, and here he was ambushed and killed. He was just 32. His body was buried in the church of Santa Maria, but a bishop later removed his remains and had them reburied outside the church, under a paving stone, so that passers-by would walk on his grave. The prince whose chief misfortune was to bear the hated name of Borgia is still remembered on the pilgrim's way. The road goes on under the relentless sun and heat. As the pilgrims fall into its rhythm, there are encouragements in the memorials to its saints and benefactors. A famous one, St. Dominic, a hermit of the 11th century, built a bridge with a causeway leading to it across the river Oca. This river gives its name to the oak and vanilla-flavored wine of the region, Rioja. He also built a hospice, which became the focal point for a small town which has its own miracle. When told that a pilgrim unjustly hanged for theft had suddenly announced from the gallows that he was not dead, but had been spared through prayers to the Virgin Mary and the saints, and should now be cut down, the magistrate retorted, "If this story is true, then let these cocks on my dinner plate stand up and crow," which they did. And here they are, near the tomb of St. Dominic and the high altar, where they can keep an eye on everything going on in the church. There is a small flock of them, and they do shifts. Pilgrims traditionally feed them crumbs. If the offering is accepted, they are assured of a safe journey to Compostela. The road goes on through the flat plain and tree-lined avenues. It has witnessed many miracles of prayer and faith, which have altered the destiny of nations. Here it passes a church dedicated to St. John of Ortega. Queen Isabel came to this church to implore the saint for a gift of a son. Her prayers were answered, and Don Juan, the hope of all Spain, was born. The town of Burgos marks the beginning of the end of the journey. Its spires and domes encourage the pilgrim to gather strength for the last long lap. The road runs across a flat, wind-swept plateau, bearing onwards to the west, long and wearying, with landmarks scored more and more frequently with the dagger cross of Santiago and the cockleshell of pilgrimage. Here the road runs right through the ruined monastery of St. Anthony, which straddled the route. Just a mile further on, a bend in the road reveals the stone fortress of Castro Jerez. Turning the corner, seeing the castle on the hill, is a moment of pride and challenge for the footsore pilgrim. So near and yet still so far, when your feet are aching and blistered, and the way still stretches out ahead. The road bears witness to many past deeds of honor and courage. At Orbigo, on the Puente del Paso, the bridge of the Passage of Arms, in the holy year of 1434, a Spanish knight, Don Suero de Quinones, challenged all who wished to cross to joust with him and 9 companions. Some chroniclers say that 700 jousts were held in 30 days. Though many were injured, only one knight was killed. True or not, it was one of the last romantic acts of the age of chivalry. The road goes on to climb the Galician hills. Now we are in the country of miracles, the land that St. James came to evangelize. The slate and thatched dwellings still stand, reminding the pilgrim of a history that goes back before the arrival of the Roman legions. High in a mountain pass lies the hostel and church of El Sobrero, built in 1072, but famous for the miracle of the Holy Eucharist, which took place in the 14th century. The story goes that one stormy day, a peasant came here to Mass. The celebrant, a weary priest, had lost faith in his mission. As he was consecrating the host, he looked at the man kneeling alone in the church. Only an idiot, he thought, would come out on a day like this to share in a non-existent miracle. Then, looking down at the bread and wine, he was mortified to see that they really had become flesh and blood. The chalice and paten used at that Mass are still treasured in the church. The road was always a dangerous and unpredictable place. There were those committed to make it safe for pilgrims, to protect them against thieves and to rescue them if they became ill or injured. The Knights of the Order of St. James were the guardians of the road. This house was the residence of noble ladies, the wives, daughters, and sisters of the members of the order. When one of the knights was killed in battle, he would be buried here, in this quiet Villa churchyard. This was journey's end for those who fought to keep the road open for others to travel. Here they are remembered and find peace. It is a place of quiet before the excitement of the last lap. A grassy hill lies ahead. This is Monte del Gozo. Weary pilgrims of the Middle Ages would find a new spurt of energy as they raced to get to the top, the winner shouting Montjoie when for the first time he caught sight of the spires of Compostela against the sky. This hill was also a symbol of the forgiveness of sin, which was earned by making the pilgrimage to Compostela. So at last the pilgrims arrive. Journey's end at Compostela, for modern pilgrims just as it was for those in the Middle Ages. They make for the great cathedral and for the pilgrim pillar set as the central column of the door, known as El Portico de la Gloria, the door of glory. The cathedral houses earlier versions of itself from the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. This is the home of St. James, the protector of all Spain, beloved apostle and martyr. Generations of pilgrims have touched this stone until it is almost worn away by the pressure of countless fingers. The arriving pilgrim has one more task to complete. It is to obtain a Compostela, a certificate, declaring that he or she has completed the true pilgrimage of St. James and is entitled to all the privileges of the road. The Compostela is no mere souvenir. For medieval pilgrims, it was a passport and a ticket for the return journey. It would grant the pilgrim free accommodation and meals in Santiago, and then allow him on the way back to pass freely through the toll routes and give him admittance to pilgrim hostels. It was also a sign for those doing penance that it was completed and that they were restored spiritually. Today, to be considered a bona fide pilgrim and to receive a certificate, it is obligatory to walk, cycle, or go on horseback. Still they come, most timing their visit to coincide with the feast day of St. James, the 25th of July, in which the passion and victory of the story of James, of Spain and of Europe, is celebrated in this great Christian shrine. the eve of the feast is a day of carnival, one not to be missed. It is celebrated with all the excitement and spectacle appropriate for 2,000 years of history.
Podemos creer o no, cada uno es muy libre de hacerlo, de si estos restos corresponden a Santiago. Hay espíritus, hay gente que lo duda, que lo discute, pero ahí están y representan para nosotros la espiritualidad de una tradición. Es decir, ha sido precisamente el Papa León XIII que en el año 1884 publicó la bula Deus Omnipotens, en la cual confirma iurbi y et orbi que los restos que se veneran en Santiago de Compostela corresponden exactamente a los de Santiago el Mayor. Así que hoy es una historia superior a la propia Santiago, a la propia Iglesia española, es una confirmación solemnísima de la Iglesia de Roma.
Sí, estás...
Santiago el acto cultural europeo, siempre enmarcando a Santiago y a su historia dentro de la unidad de Europa. Y aquí en Santiago, en este acto fabuloso que tuvo lugar en la catedral, con todas las autoridades culturales de Europa, lanzó aquel grito en Europa: Europa, vuelve a encontrarte a ti mismo, vuelve a buscar la identificación de tus señas cristianas.
Santiago's faith is universal, a place of pilgrimage par excellence, and one of the most important cultural and historical and artistic cities of Spain, maybe even of the whole world.